Hello and welcome to the Morning Bean, a show not about coffee. Instead, we enjoy our coffee while discussing current events. I'm your host, Denny London, and today's episode is called The Underpants Gnome Strategy. Before we jump to the downfall of society and possibly the next pandemic, please consider giving the show a follow and a 5-star review. It really helps those crazy robot algorithms. Algorithms. On today's show, we'll be discussing Gruesome Newsom, AB5, and the upcoming supply chain issue. California is honestly the worst. After that, we'll be discussing what I like to call the regime's Underpants Gnome Strategy to fight fossil fuels and climate change. As always, we'll have a You Probably Shouldn't Tweet That, and the TV ratings. But first, 3 quick ones. Our first quick one. For some reason, there's a lot of TDS going on in the news right now. TDS being Trump derangement syndrome. Just take a listen to these headlines. MSNBC. Are 1-6 hearings changing Trump backers' minds? MSNBC. Of course Trump is trying to overturn the 2020 election. He's faced no consequences. CNN Politics. Analysis. Donald Trump just can't quit the 2020 election. The Hill. Democrat group sues FEC over Trump's 2024 status. Fox News. MSNBC, CNN, NBC slam Dems for insane strategy boosting Trump-backed GOP candidates. Complete negligence. Something to add to that, the Democrats were actually funding America First candidates in hopes that they would lose to the Democrat candidates, which is really weird. And we'll just pick one more. NBC News. Wisconsin House Speaker says Trump called him to overturn 2020 results 20 months after the election. These headlines were all on Apple News within 4 hours of each other. There were actually many more. It's impossible for us plebs to imagine what it's like having this much media attention and fake news on your back every single day, especially after the death of his ex-wife Ivana Trump. Give the man a break. Give him a week off, and God rest her soul. Seeing this coverage today got me thinking, what would they talk about if after the 2020 election, Trump just sailed off into the sunset and lived out his life happy and rich? What did they talk about before Donnie? It's hard to imagine in 2022 life pre-Trump. Perhaps I have TDS too. I'm talking about it right now, which would be a shame if paired with my TMJ. TMJ is lockjaw, ladies and gentlemen. It's a disease, people. So please follow the podcast and tell a friend. Our second quick one. Just the News reports Manhattan DA drops murder charges against bodega worker. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg dropped the controversial murder charge against New York City bodega worker Jose Alba. The DA's office confirmed to the New York Post on Monday that it had filed a motion in Manhattan Criminal Court to dismiss the charge against the 61-year-old man after the video of the incident surfaced. It surfaced that same day. The prosecutor could not prove that the defendant was not justified in his use of deadly force, Bragg's office stated. Alba was charged after the fatal stabbing of Austin Simon, a 35-year-old convicted violent felon who attacked him inside his bodega on July 1st. Alba was being held at Rikers Island on $250,000 bond. One potential defense is that Alba reasonably believed that Simon was about to use deadly physical force, the prosecutor's office wrote in the dismissal memo, acknowledging Alba's likely criminal defense. Simon's conduct in entering the store's small private area, throwing Alba against the wall to a place he could not escape, and grabbing him by the collar could inspire deep fear in an older and shorter man as to what might be in store next, the motion said. The fact that it took them 2 weeks to dismiss the charges for this poor guy is the actual crime here. The video was very clear. It came out right away. Austin's girlfriend ran out of money on her welfare card and couldn't afford a bag of chips. This whole thing was over a bag of chips, by the way. That's when he jumped behind the counter and started attacking Jose Alba. Luckily, Alba doesn't have the mush for brains like our president Joseph R. done being a tyrant yet. Biden and stabbed the criminal to death. I hope Austin Simon rots in hell. Anyone who picks on the elderly or tries to intimidate people with violence deserve this. In my professional opinion, by professional I mean being your average American living in the suburbs, I believe Jose Alba should sue the shit out of New York and never have to work another day in his life. Our third quick one. This one's worth keeping an eye on. The trial of the honey badger has begun. Do you know who the honey badger is? I'm talking about Steve Bannon. His trial for being held in contempt of Congress began this week, and the circumstances are stranger than the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. Check out this fiery but mostly peaceful statement from Bannon after day 2.
I challenge Benny Thompson today to have the courage to come to this courthouse. If he's going to charge somebody with a crime, he's going to be man enough to show up here or send somebody like Shifty Schiff or Fang Fang Swalwell. Or send Liz Cheney, send somebody in the committee that has the guts to come here and accuse somebody of a crime. It is outrageous. And for them to sit there and try to get a complete hearing and they won't bring in any testimony about FBI involvement, any testimony about DHS involvement, any testimony about any other involvement, and what's driving this. The total and complete illegitimacy of Joe Biden. Trump won, Joe Biden illegitimate. 50% of the American people believe that today, and they believe that not from hearing from mainstream media, from our great colleagues in the media, because they won't show any of it. That information has been suppressed from day one, but almost 50% of the American people believe it. You can't govern this country if you're not looked at as legitimate. This is why no head of state in the world treats him with any respect. This is why the Chinese Communist Party treats him with no respect. This is why the Saudis embarrass him and humiliate him while he's over with the fist bump. You don't do that to a legitimate president of the United States. We have a constitutional crisis in this nation right now, and they're charging me with a crime. Have the guts and the courage to show up here and say exactly why it's a crime. Benny Thompson is a total, absolute disgrace, and this show trial they're running is a disgrace. And I will promise you one thing. When the Republicans have a sweeping victory on November 8th, starting in January, you're going to get a real committee. You're going to get a real committee with a ranking member who will be a Democrat. You will have a minority council that will be a Democrat. And this will be run appropriately, and the American people will get the full story.
Dang, bro. I know that was a longer clip than what we usually play, but it was definitely worth hearing to get an idea of who this person is. Speaking of, who is the honey badger? Wikipedia says Stephen Kevin Bannon is an American media executive, political strategist, and former investment banker who served as the White House's chief strategist in the administration of the U.S. President Donald Trump during the first 7 months of Trump's term. But there's more. He has a very popular show called The War Room, which airs on Rumble, Real America's Voice, and my favorite social media platform, Getter. You can follow me there at Denny London. The charge. Mr. Bannon is being held in contempt of Congress for refusing a subpoena, not just one count, but 2 counts. Each count of contempt of Congress carries a minimum of 30 days and a maximum of 1 year in jail, as well as a fine of $100 to $1,000, which, sounds serious on paper. Well, historically, it hasn't been that serious. The last people to be found guilty were Watergate mastermind G. Gordon Liddy in 1974 and Rita M. Lavelle, who was a federal environmental official under Ronald Reagan in 1984. The defense. Bannon's team planned on arguing the following. The J6 committee is an illegitimate committee for the following reasons. It only has 9 members. It's supposed to have 13. Please refer to House Resolution 503. It is not bipartisan. Nancy Pelosi hand-selected all 7 Dems and the 2 rhinos on the committee. The minority leader did not have a say in who was appointed. They tried to put Matt Gaetz on there, and he was denied. He would have been fantastic on this committee to kind of bring a balance to it. They're saying the subpoena isn't real. Similar to a person who got 81 million votes running for president from his basement. It's just not real. The second defense that they have is of executive privilege, which is the privilege claimed by the president for the executive branch of the U.S. government, of withholding information in the public interest. Because of executive privilege, Bannon could not submit the requested documents or talk about his conversations between him and Trump. Apparently, his attorneys had correspondence with the J6 attorneys in regards to these issues that we brought up, and didn't think there was a set-in-stone deadline due to the technicalities. The judge advised that Bannon's team could not use these 2 defenses. Basically, the trial was going to go like this. The only thing that they could ask was, hey, yo, did you get a subpoena? Yes? Did you provide the info? No? You're guilty, brah. The M. Night Shyamalan plot twist. Now, on day 2, the prosecutors attempted to add the talks between the two parties as evidence. In them, they talk about the first two defenses that I mentioned, illegitimate committee and executive privilege. They seem to be in quite a pickle here. How are they going to prove they requested this subpoena without accidentally bringing up the wannabe main defense points? Well, they can't. So they reluctantly agreed to allow the correspondence, and all hell is about to break loose. Bannon can now talk about his 2 defense points. Perhaps by the time you listen to this show, there will be more info out about the trial. I heard as of Wednesday, the prosecutors rested their case, and the defense is due to begin today, Thursday. Next week, I'll give an update, probably another quick one, on the resolution, but as of right now, it's obvious that this is a political show trial. A clown fiesta, a shit show, whatever you want to call it. And as stated in the past, the whole point of the J6 committee is to prosecute and disqualify any and all of Trump's supporters and Trump's allies. Now on to our first story. The devil himself, aka Gruesome Newsom, is back at it again with terrible woke policies that aim to destroy the country. Not many are aware of what AB5 is. Some may even confuse it with the new COVID variant BA5. Don't worry, we won't be talking about the cocoa in this episode. Ironically, 7 months ago, I created a YouTube video trying to diagnose the supply chain issue. Take a listen. My research led me to a California bill called AB5, which was signed into law by the devil himself in 2019. I mean, Gavin Newsom. The bill basically stops drivers from being independent contractors and forces them to seek permanent employment with companies and forces those companies to give them benefits. Not everybody is happy about it, obviously. However, AB5 was blocked from being implemented in California's trucking sector because of an injunction handed down by a U.S. District Court in California at the start of January 2020. Therefore, we cannot blame Gavin at this time. Well, we could blame him now. Forcing these truckers to no longer be independent contractors is going to impact 70,000 truckers. They will no longer be able to move product within the state of California to the rest of the country. And just an FYI, the Port of Long Beach and the Port of Los Angeles are responsible for 40% of all seaborne imports to the United States, which makes sense when you look at a map of Earth. Asia is essentially right there, and everyone knows everything is made in China. Similar to the rest of the world, the people are rising up and they've had enough. CNBC reports large trucker protest over California's gig worker law AB5 shut down Port of Oakland terminals. The Oakland International Container Terminal, OICT, management closed operations on Wednesday at the Port of Oakland due to the independent trucker protest over California's gig law known as AB5. The port's over 3 marine terminals are effectively shut down for trucks as well. The Port of Oakland told CNBC, while there are some vessel labor operations underway, this is the 3rd day truckers have protested California's gig worker labor law, which was sparked by the rise of gig economy platforms like Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash. A 2-year legal stay was recently lifted when the Supreme Court decided not to hear the case, which would have protected truckers from the impact of the law. AB5 requires companies that hire independent contractors to reclassify them as employees, but there are some exceptions in the law across industries. The majority of truck drivers in California are owner-operated, and many in this job category are concerned about their future. An estimated 70,000 truckers, see, my memory is pretty good, who own and drive their own trucks would fall under this law, and they do not want to become an employee or part of a union in order to work. The Port of Oakland in Oakland, California in the U.S., on Thursday, July 14, 2022, truckers servicing some of the U.S. busiest ports are staging protests as state-level labor rules that change their employment status begin to take into effect, creating another choking point in stressed U.S. supply chains. The article goes on, CNBC reached out to Governor Gavin Newsom's office asking when the enforcement of the law would begin, as well as if truckers have a way within the law to remain independent. In email to CNBC, the governor's Office of Business and Economic Development Director D.D. Myers stated, with the federal courts rejecting the truckers' industry appeals, it's time to move forward, comply with the law, and work together to create a fairer and more sustainable industry for all. Governor Newsom's office wrote in a separate email to CNBC, we also suspect the landscape may change. Independent drivers becoming their own authority and or then existing firms becoming an employee driver model. It may take a few weeks for us to feel the impact of these shutdowns. But I'll tell you what. I'll tell you this. If you thought 2020 and 2021 supply chain issues were bad, just wait. Buckle up, bucko. This issue won't just be for a few months. It will be forever if AB5 stands. And this right here, Mr. Newsom is the potential Democratic presidential candidate. It's the best they got. He's one that doesn't care about his own state, the American people, or the supply chain. Something worth noting is that California ranks number 1 in population and apparently number 1 in ignorance since they keep voting for people like the devil himself. Only time will tell what happens with this one. Our second story. The Biden regime is attempting the Underpants Gnome Strategy to combat climate change and fossil fuels. What is the Underpants Gnome Strategy? I'm glad you asked. Step 1, steal underpants. Step 2. Step 3, profit. Just like Jenny from the block Psaki, we'll circle back to that in a moment. BBC reports Biden unveils $2.3 billion plan to fight climate change. Gosh darn, because why not? Money isn't real after all. U.S. President Joseph, are you done being tired yet, Biden, has announced $2.3 billion to help build infrastructure that can withstand extreme weather and natural disasters. Wait, hold up. I thought last November they passed a $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill. You mean to tell me that when discussing creating that bill, they didn't have the funds to put towards this? Where did that money actually go? That might be for another show. The article continues. But he, Biden, stopped short of formally declaring a climate emergency, which would grant him further powers. AKA, he wants to impose, well, this is my conspiracy theory. He wants to impose martial law, suspend all future elections, and declare him the official supreme overlord of the North. Mr. Biden spoke in Massachusetts as a heat wave brings extreme weather to Europe and North America. Tens of millions of people in the U.S. across more than 24 states are living under heat warnings this week. Climate change is literally an existential threat to our nation and to the world, the president said in a Wednesday speech, which was delivered outside a former coal-fired power plant in the town of Somerset. Sorry, if you see the picture of him speaking outside, you would really question who said, let's do it right here, where it looks like the world ended, and talked about beginning a new world where it's all about climate change and renewable energy. Anyways, I digress. The health of our citizens and our communities is at stake, so we have to act. Later in the article, they mentioned that $385 million of these funds will be used to help states fund air conditioning units in homes and community cooling centers. And to be honest, I have no idea what a community cooling center is. Have any of you ever seen a sign driving down the hallway, next right, community cooling center? I don't think so. Now, one thing I hope is that the government is going to pay my AC bill with this $385 million. Some of the funds will also be used to support offshore wind and energy developments in the Gulf of Mexico. Fantastic. The article doesn't mention the company receiving these funds, but Mr. Biden did during the press conference today, and your boy was watching and trolling everybody during it. Vineyard Wind is the lucky winner. They are a joint venture between Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners, based out of Denmark, and Avangrid Renewables, a subsidiary of Avangrid Inc., whose parent organization is Iberdrola, based out of Spain. Did you follow that? Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners, based out of Denmark, Avangrid Renewables, which is a subsidiary of Avangrid Inc., whose parent company, Iberdrola, is based out of Spain. Vineyard Wind is headed by CEO Klaus S. Muller, which I live by a general rule nowadays to not trust anybody named Klaus. Please see the World Economic Forum website. They all just sound like Bond villains. The administration continues to be consistent with their America Last approach. Could they really not find an American company to give this money to and front the project? It wouldn't surprise me if Hunter Biden was on the board of one of these companies, or at least the Biden crime family had ties to them in some way. We've been hearing about the world ending due to climate change, or at least I have for the past 20 years. It's always what they resort to when they have nothing else to run on. Man, bear, pig is real. I'm super cereal, says Al Gore from South Park. In a nutshell, I know how to break this down. In a nutshell, winter equals climate change due to it being cold. Really cold. And summer is global warming due to it being hot. And scientifically, summer. It really is a brilliant system they have going on. Back to the Underpants Gnome Strategy, which is step 1, steal underpants, aka get rid of all fossil fuels, pivot to green energy, and force people to buy electric cars. Step 2. Step 3, profit. The world becomes green. We will all drive these electric cars and no longer depend on any fossil fuels. Hooray! The crucial step missing is that second one. Those pauses weren't an audio malfunction, that was on purpose. How are they going to make it to step 3 to quote unquote profit without the technology to do so? Now, I'm all for solar power and renewable energy, but the advancements have to happen naturally. It can't be forced. As of right now, with batteries, we could run the United States for 75 seconds. 75 seconds. And electric cars can travel roughly 200 to 400 miles until they need a charge. And how are they charged? Well, charging stations, duh. Okay, you smarmy son of a gun. Where does the power come from for these charging stations? Let's break it down. Per AmericanGeosciences.org, energy in the United States comes from the following sources: 28% petroleum, which creates crude oil and natural gas; 17.8% comes from coal; 12.7% is renewable energy; and 9.6% is nuclear. I don't believe that equals 100%. I don't really feel like doing the math, so we'll just keep on going here. Now, I'm all for cutting back on petroleum if we start building more nuclear plants. Nuclear is the ultimate green energy. Growing up, I guess thanks to The Simpsons, I always thought the smoke coming out of those stacks was toxic, like a toxic kind of vapor. Turns out, it's just water vapor. An interesting fact I stumbled across is that the breeder reactors can power all of humanity for more than 4 billion years, which gives us plenty of time to perfect the art of becoming a Type 2 civilization and utilizing the energy of our star efficiently. This regime hides behind a facade. They don't actually care about the planet. The planet is just fine with us humans. We're not going to destroy it by utilizing fossil fuels. They want us to suffer. They want us to be poor. They want to destroy the middle class. They want you to eat bugs and like it, own nothing, and live in Mark Zuckerberg's metaverse. Biden plans on announcing some executive orders next week to fight climate change and go against the recent Supreme Court's decisions against EPA overreach, which is crazy. The admission that the executive branch will break the law and the Constitution to push these unattainable green energy expectations is grounds for impeachment, and at the very least another Tea Party. Before we jump into You Probably Shouldn't Tweet That, I'd like to share 3 thoughts I had this week that didn't necessarily fit into the show. Our government will send over $56 billion to Ukraine to balance their budget and protect their border, but the people in charge will not pay your student loans off. Not saying I'm for or against student loan forgiveness, but it's obvious and clear who is against it: your government. Number 2, does swearing under oath mean anything if someone doesn't believe in God? Basically, someone can lie without the fear of going to hell. We need to become a God-worshipping and God-fearing nation once again, or figure out another punishment. I have an idea. If you lie, you die. Number 3, you can't live in a normal society without civil norms. For example, only women can get pregnant, and that there are 2 genders. All right, this week's You Probably Shouldn't Tweet That comes from Congresswoman and future President AOC. And just give you a little bit of backstory, I'm sure everybody's seen it on the news. AOC, the whole squad got arrested for protesting outside of the Supreme Court, which they really didn't get arrested. They walked away with their hands behind their back. As somebody who's been arrested before, I didn't get that option. they just slapped the cuffs on me. This was in a response to Nancy Mace. Nancy Mace said to her, "Politics has become performative art, so of course AOC fakes being in handcuffs. Performance, not policy, is the name of the game up here." And she put the little emoji, female with the hand parallel with the ear, palm up. AOC responded, "No faking here. Putting your hands behind your back is a best practice while being detained, handcuffed or not, to avoid escalating charges like resisting arrest. But given how you lied about a fellow rape survivor for points, as you put it to me, I don't expect much else from you." Ooh, a clapback from AOC. It's funny how she's saying to be peaceful when the police are detaining you, but then she funds bail for BLM and Antifa people. But that's none of my business. And last but not least, the TV ratings, coming from one of our favorite Twitter pages, RoadMN. And we like to bring this up every week because I want to remind you that you're the majority. And that is apparent this week for sure. This is for Tuesday, July 19th. We'll look at the total viewers, and we're going to take a look at prime time. Starting off at 8 p.m. with the homie Tucker Carlson, 2.8 million viewers. He captured 57%. All in with Chris Hayes from MSNBC had 26%, and Anderson Cooper had 16%. 9 p.m. Hannity. Looks like he's back, baby. He had 53% of the viewership. MSNBC Prime had 31%, not quite their prime levels they've ever been. And CNN Tonight, might as well have went to sleep. They only had 16% of the viewership. At 10 p.m., The Ingram Angle had 51% of the viewership. The Last Word with L. O'Donnell had 34%. That's MSNBC. And CNN, Don Lemon Tonight, also should just went to bed, had 14% of the viewership. So do not be afraid to speak your mind and tell the truth. Thank you so much for checking out today's show. If you enjoyed it, tell a friend. And in fact, I think you and your hypothetical friend should give it a follow. New episodes every Thursday at 8 a.m. Eastern. We also upload one video a week to the Rumble account, at The Morning Bean. Feel free to check out the socials, Getter or Twitter, at Denny London. We can continue the conversation there. Anyways, thank you so much for listening. God bless and cue the music.